All right, welcome to the Eric Tries Too Hard podcast, episode 110. I am here with Kyle Erf. How's it going, Kyle?
It's going well. Happy to be here for Big 110.
Yes, that's actually we saved you special for 110. We couldn't get you on the 112 episode. That's of course where the players dwell. If you're a fan of late 90s R&B, but I know you from the Hard Times as a writing staff member, and we'll get into that later. But what would you generally describe yourself as in the entertainment world?
Man, that's a good question. Right, so I would probably bill myself as a writer and performer here in New York City. Still doing a little bit of everything. I do writing for the web. I do some sketch stuff. I do stand up. Basically, jack of all trades, definitely master of none. And just growing.
You've already passed my first test, which is listeners of this podcast know I don't trust anyone who can take a compliment. So the fact that you already said that is like, no, he's good. He knows what he's doing.
Keep him coming. I'm terrible at it. I'll just throw it right back at you.
Are we going to get to a passive-aggressive compliment war? Who can make each other feel more uncomfortable? Because I'm down for that.
We'll save that for a run at the end.
All right, absolutely.
In the show, showstopper.
Yeah, and I really like your hair-beard combo. It looks good. All right, so let me tell you. So you are from New York City, or well, you're living in New York City. Are you from there?
No, I'm from Arkansas originally.
Okay. Yeah. When did you move out there?
It's been like a long journey, but so I went to college in Pennsylvania, and then I moved to New York maybe 3 years ago.
Okay, what did you study in college?
I double majored in it's a small liberal arts school called Swarthmore College. This is the most liberal arts fucking thing. I double majored in computer science and religion.
Okay.
Not like any particular religion, just like the concept. So
basically the Matrix. That's what you Matrix.
You know, I might use that. That's like better than I've been able to make it seem.
That's really cool. So, all right. How did you I love part of this, like the podcast, when I interview people, some episodes are interviews, some are hangs, some are themed. But for the interview ones, I love knowing a couple things. I love knowing, one, how people got into the passions that they have. And I also love knowing, having people describe, like, when they're in the thick of the struggle of how do I turn this from a hobby into what I do for a living. And I normally go in linear order, but I want to skip around a little bit with you.
Please.
How did a double major, a Arkansas native who moved to Pennsylvania for college and did a double major in religion and would you say computer science?
Computer science.
Computer science. How did that transfer into a New York City dwelling comedian? When and where did that happen?
Sure. Well, first of all, you put it that way, you make my life sound interesting, which is not true. But it's I mean, first of all, like, I am not doing comedy full time, and I think most like my day job is I am a software engineer, which is it's a good job that I have, and it does actually let me flex some creative muscles. But I don't know, comedy is just something I've been doing for years now. Like I thought it would be really cool to get into, and I tried really hard to do as much as I could in college. And then I've just been sort of keeping pace with that.
And did you go to New York for? Well, why did you know what I was going to give
why New York?
Choice, but that's dumb. Yeah, what led to you going to New York?
Comedy.
Awesome.
That is why I'm here. It is why. Yeah. I mean, I'm a very practical, like, play it safe kind of guy, and it was like, I'm gonna try and get a job here first. I've never been like this starving artist, as cool as that sounds.
You and I relate very much. I did. So are you 25? 3 years out of college?
I'm almost 25. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I just turned 30, and I'm like, I did music. I just got into comedy a couple of years ago, but I did music from when I was 15 until I still do it today. But like, right. I kind of put the brakes on and not did it as like full time in addition to my full time job like last year.
Yeah. Oh, and
wow. I was always like, but that's the thing. I was willing to go 40 hours a week at work and then 40 hours a week at music. But I was never the starving artist. I was just like, no, I did a tour the end of college for about a month. And then I lived completely broke after I finished college for about 6 months just doing music. And after that, I was like, this isn't for me. This is, I'm going to work a job and just bust. I'd rather do work than live like shit.
You know, for what it's worth, like I've noticed this in the comedy scene, and I don't mean this in any negative way towards anybody, but what I have noticed is the people at the level I'm at who are just going all in on it, I'm about as productive as they are. Like and I'll show up in meetings on time too. Like that's an extra plus. Like it's weird. It definitely.
You're on time for this podcast. That's a big difference. I'm not used to that at all.
Oh, it's Sunday night.
Yeah, what are we doing?
But I do what I can. But yeah, it is. It's definitely gotten to the point where my day job, like I could probably get more done if I didn't have it, but I also do enjoy it. So I'm taking things slower.
I noticed that, and this is like, I noticed a lot of performers that I know, they have jobs at their bartending, their wait staff, whatever it is, and they're doing these kind of like late night people jobs, and or like people interaction jobs, and I totally get that. But they always complain about not having enough time to write or enough time to do this. And what blows my mind is like, I've worked office jobs before where you just do administrative work. The amount of, I've made more money years ago, and now I have like a real job that I can't do this. But years ago, I've made more money off comedy writing because no one was paying me to do comedy writing, but I just did it while I was at work getting paid to sit at a desk. Like, I do pretty well. Like I was like, why don't you just get these boring desk jobs that everyone says that are like awful because you don't do anything and you sit there. Everyone has a smartphone now. You have no excuse not to just like, you can write so often.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. Well, okay. So jumping way back, so because I know you through Hard Times, you're, I think, the 4th or 5th. I've got somebody else from Hard Times that I'm also doing the site because I think everybody's so funny. Like all the people I invite to come on are so funny.
It's a great room.
I know. I can't, dude. When people ask me, like, it's the weirdest comedy credit because most people in comedy have no idea what it is, but people who are outside of comedy do. And I ran into a couple people at an open mic who knew what it was. I was like, oh yeah, I write, and I find myself just gushing about how amazing the staff writing room is. Because like, this is one of the coolest environments, if not the best environment I've ever been in. Well, like, it's also great with you guys because not only do you have this comedy knowledge, but this whole punk rock thing that jumps in. And so the fact that's such an esoteric combination.
It is. It's real niche.
So yeah, I know. And the fact that so many people it resonates with is, I thought when I saw this site, I was like, oh, that's basically for me and my 10 buddies. But there are so many people who get it. And I think that's an amazing testament to the internet and alternative culture. So let me ask you this. Normally I ask bands or comedians one of these questions, but I can fortunately ask you both of these. First off, how did you get into punk rock? And what was the moment where it felt like, oh, this is different than other music. This is different. This speaks to me. And it could be metal, whatever your preferred genre is.
Yeah. This is.
And then two. Same with comedy. So tell me about getting into alternative culture and music, and then comedy, and what like really spoke to you about each one.
Awesome. Yeah. So I think on some level those are a little intertwined. But for music, this is where I sort of come out as, you know, I am like a writer for the Hard Times, and I love punk rock. And I kind of keep my mouth shut sometimes because the dudes in that, like the rest of the people in that group, I feel like some of them have very encyclopedic knowledges of punk music, and I feel so casual in comparison. Really, I'm actually, you know, growing up, I just got super into ska, which coming out of the closet. Yeah, that was my whole thing. That's like what in 7th grade I got Why Do They Rock So Hard by Real Big Fish. That was like maybe the 3rd or 4th.
That's my second favorite, I think second favorite ska album behind Something in the Between by Streetlight Manifesto. I think those are my top 2.
Those are so different that I don't even want to compare them. They're like the exact like opposite ends of the spectrum. But yeah, that was like true. Ska was like all I really listened to for a couple years.
Yeah.
And then I got, at the same time, I wanted to start playing music. I really wanted to play, or I played trumpet in band, which is maybe how ska happened. I was like, oh, you can
Yes.
look at, you're young, you're like, oh, look at these guys, like they're cool in a band, they play this like instrument. Did not help me pick up the chicks, but I did end up getting a bass
That's
guitar.
fun. Yeah,
and
which also doesn't help with the chicks.
No, I'm 0 for 2.
And pick up French horn next, maybe. Just keep that cycle going.
Yeah. And bass guitar is actually what I think got me into punk music, just because it's so weird how these very small moments will end up just changing the trajectory of your taste or like how you live your life. But I got just an issue of Bass Player. I don't remember if it were Bass Player or Bass Guitar magazine. It was one of those two magazines. And they had like their punk issue, and it was like the 100 best bass lines in punk.
Oh, cool.
And every like few of them, they'd actually have the tab from like the signature riff or something in there. And it was just going through stuff like Maxwell Murder from Rancid or like London Calling.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah. So like Rancid, it's just, I learned to play that bass line and I could do it for a couple years.
Really?
And now it's once you spend like 20 hours learning it, you can learn pretty much any bass line. But so just I got into punk that way, just like looking at bass stuff, because there's some really good bass lines in punk and there's some really interesting stuff. And the stuff that isn't that interesting is very easy to play with your friends.
Yeah, by the way, for every shitty punk guitar player who, like, when you look at it, like, oh, they're just not that great. Hell, there was a Hard Times article, what was it, artistic genius mistaken for lack of talent or something. That's for every like awful punk guitarist, there is an amazing punk bassist where you're like, that bassist is incredible.
Yeah,
it's one of the weirdest like juxtapositions. But sorry, keep going. It's just so interesting to me.
Yeah, and I mean that was, and also like with ska, you can get some pretty interesting and like really fun bass lines to play. Whereas with just more contemporary rock music is just like
root notes.
And
how did with what? Okay. Do you still love Why Do They Rock So Hard, or White Trash, as Real Big Fish fans know it?
I don't know. I feel like I've come to appreciate Turn the Radio Off a little more.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think just like when you're in junior high, Why Do They Rock So Hard? It's like, yeah, this is cool. They're saying what was crazy to me is they don't actually swear at all in that album until like the third or fourth song, and then it's nothing but F words. And so like my parents thought I was getting something safe, and then like the second they leave,
the second they leave, he stops singing about Gwen Stefani and starts going into.
I think one of the, I forget the song, but the chorus is basically just "fuck off." Like that's the whole chorus.
They have like 4 songs like that.
Yeah, they're, as I get older, I still really love Real Big Fish. I think they were here in New York a couple weeks ago, and I really regret missing them.
They're one of the few bands. I've seen them so many times in my life that they're one of the few bands that I will skip, because I'll just be like, all right, let me know when you're with Less Than Jake or when you're with some other band I want to see, because I've just seen it so many times. And I remember back in the day when they had the majority of their original lineup, and I forget his name, but it's a comedian who he was the star of Kung Pao, which is a parody of all those. They would hire comics, and he was one of the ones I remember being named, who would write their stage banter and their bits, because they used to troll the audience before YouTube, when the audience wasn't able to get that it wasn't actually real at first.
That's crazy. Sure. They were hiring writers to. I didn't know that was an opportunity. I want to do contributing writing for stage banter.
Because they used to do stuff like they pretend to like break up halfway through the show, and it's like 1998. And people are like, wait, what am I watching?
That's so funny. Yeah, I remember the first time I saw them live. Before they played Beer. They were like, we don't play that Beer song anymore. It's we need to move on, and they just do it to like piss off the crowd. One person was cheering, and they weren't expecting that. They were like, yeah, grow as artists.
Their singer Aaron Barrett has one of the greatest he has 2 amazing moments. If you ever hear their Our Live Album Is Better Than Your Live album, this double disc live thing they did, and he has 2 great moments, well, a lot of great moments, but 2 really funny ones where I'm like, that guy's a genius. One where he's talking about like somebody like heckles him or interrupts him and he's talking and he's like, hey, hey, you can't yell at me. I had a mediocre, successful single in the 90s. Do you have any idea who I think I am? Like, that's great. But he also opened up, and with perfect comedic timing, I'm going to tell you what it is, but if you have to listen for it to do justice, he opens up Beer by going, I hate this song and I hate all of you, and starts playing the guitar riff, and then right before the drums kick in, he goes, I'm just kidding. I don't hate this song. Anyway, okay, so that's
good comedic timing, honestly. They do good work.
Yeah. So that's kind of how you got into music, and I like how you started out as more of a performance base than necessarily a lot of people who just are like, I'm into it, I don't do it, but I'm into it. And also, my first instrument that I played for the longest time was bass, so I very much I feel like we have an affinity where it's kind of like we know the struggle.
I know what's up. I don't actually have a bass in my apartment just because it's New York and I can really only have like keyboards and an acoustic guitar. But I'll always be a bass player, I think.
Oh, that's how I feel too. I've been in the most successful band I've ever been in. It's been the one I've been in for the last 5 years, and I barely touched a bass in those last 5 years because I play guitar. But I still am just like, no, I'm a bassist. I identify as a bassist.
Forever, I'm a bassist.
And bass pronouns, bassies. I don't know how that works. So tell me how you got into comedy, and if you have an early memory of like what made you kind of like have a love for it.
I wish I had a cool, like, wholly connected tree of how this happened, but I think it was just sort of like I always liked funny stuff, but I feel like everyone does, so I don't really know.
I liked feeling joy.
I think, yeah, I mean, my dad was always really funny, and he would tell dumb dad jokes, but he definitely like had an appreciation of humor. And I think at some point, also around middle school, some of my friends got into like watching Comedy Central, like, oh, this whole channel I hadn't even thought of. I got into that. I started watching The Simpsons every day on Fox, 5 p.m.
Yeah, channel time. Remember it.
Yeah, exactly.
Any stand-ups that you remember liking in particular?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wasn't super into stand-up comedy. Like I would watch it. I would watch like just see what was on Comedy Central. So it'd be like that and Mad TV reruns, which I will defend that show. It's not good, but I will defend it.
I think Key and Peele have the same stance, so you're in.
Yeah, there you go. There was redeeming qualities. And a lot of racist shit. But anyway. The biggest, like, earliest time I can remember really just appreciating a stand-up comedian was I was watching it. I just happened on it halfway through Mitch Hedberg's Comedy Central half hour. And I just remember thinking, this guy is so interesting, and I didn't know you could like talk like that or do that kind of stuff. It was the first time I ever really like connected. Even though in retrospect, he just does a kind of like a lot of impersonal one-liners, just his delivery. I was just so struck by it. And I never caught his name. They didn't put up his name at the end of the special, or it might have been in like a credit scroll, but it wasn't like that was Mitch Hedberg, by the way. If you turned it halfway through,
did you Google afterwards? Just Google guy who looks like me a little bit.
That was the problem. Is like in the early 2000s. It was really hard to Google for things based on, it was just harder to find stuff. So I did, every few months I'd try to Google like guy LSD in the woods, bear, like just the bits I could remember. And it never, I went into a bookstore and they were playing like his comedy album and I asked them what it was and they were like, I don't know. I don't manage the stereo. And I was like, all right. And then like literally like 2 years later, I find out like I saw another special of his just randomly on TV. I was like, that's the guy. That's Mitch Hedberg. Oh my God. And I go to look him up and that was like a week after he had died.
Oh, geez.
It was just like the worst way to find out about your favorite comedian.
A friend of mine saw him a week or two before he died.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, oh man. Cause yeah, did you ever see, two things. One, you said this guy is so interesting. And that little bit of insight I think is really cool because, like, for the longest time, I I tried to figure out. There's a Patton Oswalt special. I love Patton Oswalt, but there's a special that he did around that time when Mitch Hedberg died, like late 2004, early 2005, for Comedy Central. It was basically a stripped down and less offensive version of his Feelin' Kinda Patton album that he did for Comedy Central.
Right.
And I remember watching it going, this is kind of funny. And of course, Feelin' Kinda Patton is amazing.
Yeah, that's a great album.
Reign. But like this Comedy Central cleaned up version of it wasn't as good. But I was like, this is kind of funny. But I was like, but I'm drawn to this person and I couldn't figure out why. And years later, I realized through podcasting, I was like, oh, it's because it was interesting. The idea of being interesting in comedy is so much more important than being just funny if you want to have a long-term career.
Yeah.
And the fact that you used the word interesting was like, that's why comedy spoke to you.
Yeah,
because there was an interesting comedian.
I think you hit the nail right on the head there. Like,
I love that.
The stuff that you remember is always the most compelling, or just like a new perspective on something that you'd never considered.
There are bits like that I remember hearing from late 90s, early 2000s, and it wasn't until 10 to 15 years later I'm listening to a podcast and I'm like, wasn't that the guy who did that joke that's been in my head for my whole life? Like, holy shit. Speaking of the Mitch Hedberg half hour for Comedy Central, did you ever, I forget what record it came with, but did you ever see, like, there was some record that was sold on Comedy
Mitch
Central?
all together, and they have the uncut version.
Did you watch it? You watched the uncut version?
No, it makes me feel a lot better, actually.
Yeah, because it's like, he really was just like bombing left and right.
Bombing
and then he ran the light for about 10 to 15 minutes, and they used most of that for his cut down.
Masterful
it's a half-hour
editing.
special, but it was unbelievable. I'm so glad you noticed that.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things.
That's awesome. I've talked to a lot of people about this, and no one has either remembered it or like watched it because it's such a weird, specific thing. That's awesome.
It's
so those are kind of like your influences, I guess, as middle school turns into high school. So when you went to college, what kind of performing did you do in college?
In college, I was like, this is. And I wish in retrospect I hadn't been as like by the book and like you have to limit yourself to what's available to you like on college campuses or whatever. Like,
me too. Jesus. Oh my God. Yeah. Sorry. Keep going.
But I got early like beginning like the first week of like freshman year, I auditioned for our college had like an improv team and a sketch team. And a humor magazine, and I tried out for the improv team, got like 3 rounds of callbacks. I'd never done it before. I just liked whose line is it anyway. 3 rounds of callbacks, didn't make the team. And if you can't tell, I'm still bitter about it. No, some of those people are my best friends now. It's totally fine. And then the sketch team, I auditioned for that freshman year, did not get in. There was no audition process for the humor magazine, so I just kind of stuck with that.
Walked right in.
Walked into that. And that's sort of what I did the first year. The next year, I did get on the sketch team. So for the rest of college, I was kind of just juggling those two things. I ended up as the editor of the humor magazine.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.
Which was cool. It was a very small operation.
Still doing it is so much more than what most other people do. A lot of other people don't even start doing anything until mid-20s, late 20s kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy I did it. And then sketch was great. I ended up, I lived in Philadelphia one summer, and I like started taking classes at the Philadelphia Improv Theater, and that was really cool to just get into what I saw as like the real shit, like the real scene. Like these guys are cool. They're like fucking they swear. They have shows in bars. It's great. Like,
they swear.
I mean the sketch group at Swarthmore College is it's called Boy Meets Tractor, and they actually were, I think, a really cool, interesting sketch group. Very cerebral, but sketch is very different outside of that bubble. Okay, no one wants to see my story. I feel like in New York, sketch is like you gotta like edit things down as much as you can and like find the joke and like escalate it and just like it is better also.
No, that makes perfect sense. That's what like I relate most to when I talk to people. I'm doing this podcast for about whatever, 2 years, and in those 2 years done close to 200 episodes between various podcasts. So like that's helped me a little bit, but I've started doing stand-up just for the last month. I just go up like 2 times a week.
Man,
done it a handful of times. No, thanks. But like, so when I try to relate to comics, I don't try to act like I know a lot about stand-up or sketch. I feel confident in writing and conversation holding. But the thing as far as creating a product, I relate to with music because I've been writing songs for 15 years, 14 years, whatever it is. And in writing songs, I found that once I really started like getting crazy about it after about doing it for like 7 or 8 years, it was really, oh, what's the point in the song that's really good? How do I escalate that? How do I strip down the stuff that's not needed and really put out like that kind of finished product? And it wasn't until then where I started seeing a real like increase in positive response to it. And that's the same thing now that I'm doing with stand-up. And I'm fortunate enough to have a lot of other stand-ups who are much more experienced than me giving me advice. But like every time I do a mic, I come in with like a bit that's basically like a minute and a half long, and I get maybe like a chuckle here or a laugh there, but then nothing for the rest of it. And I go home and I go, okay, let me cut out 60 of these 90 seconds and then figure out how to, keep drilling that one. And it's, if I didn't have that experience, point being, you're absolutely right. To make it so much better, you really have to just go hardcore into, nope, get rid of it. I don't care if I thought it was particularly meaningful or if it was really hard for me to accomplish. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We have to reconfigure. And I think that's perfect.
I think that's, basically the most essential skill to, and like probably the one that comes the slowest, at least in my experience. Like it just has taken me so long to get better. What I will say is like, I've been, and you know this already, but like I've been like pretty active on Twitter, and like it's because about a year ago. Thank you so much. It's like probably the best thing I'm doing. Like
I'll have you plug stuff at the end, but tell everyone your Twitter because I love it. Your name is Kyle Earth. What is your Twitter?
It's at Kyle Earth. You got it. It's just at Kyle Earth.
Beautiful.
KYLEERF. But yeah, it's actually because I do stand up here in New York, and it's the thing that I'll do a set on a show or something, and one of the comics will come up to me afterward, and they'll like, I think they're gonna compliment my set, but they're just like, I like your Twitter, and I'm just like, all right, thank you. Weird time to bring that up, but thanks a lot.
Oh man. Now, could I buy some jokes off you, man?
I mean, I will sell out in a heartbeat. Absolutely, I'll contribute right into anything. But anyway, the point of me bringing this up is about like a year and a half ago, I was like, all right, Twitter's a thing. I should write more stuff that people can see. I'm just gonna like post a tweet every day. It doesn't have to be good. And what I found through doing that is I look back on stuff I wrote like a year ago. I'm just like, this is garbage. Writing for Twitter, just because of the character limit. Yep. It forces you to really just condense and cut and like reword and make things as punchy as possible. And also, honestly, if anyone's writing this, like anyone's listening to this podcast who is like aspiring to get better at comedy writing, I highly recommend it just for that reason.
That's absolutely what I joined Twitter to do, and I would do it, but like I don't have that many jokes. I should have just kept on doing it because like, let me ask you this: in real life, do you find yourself long-winded?
No. I don't know. I'll give you the longest answer to that as possible, confirming.
All right. I needed that because I can't come up with a coherent thought in one sentence. And with Twitter, I had such a hard time because giving me a blank slate, I was like, I don't know what to do with this. And then, so I tried doing I'd find funny hashtags or I'd play whatever the at midnight games were. But then I found myself like, okay, good. I'm getting punchier. I'm getting more concise, but I'm still in a box where I'm just riffing off the same template. And I was like, man, if only I could find something that was semi-structured as far as themes, had a character limit, not a strict character limit, but to make it good has to have a character limit, and something that could lead to something big and high exposure. I was like, if only I had that, I could get better. And then I found the hard times. I was like, are you kidding me? This could not be a more perfect breeding ground for solid jokes. The amount of ideas I've had to condense into 10 words. It's insane. Yeah.
It's
Which
real.
is
Like
probably why you're
usually,
so good at it, because you have that Twitter and you're
Thank you.
already like just view it through the lens of alternative culture, and boom.
I mean, yeah. I thank you for saying that. I do think I definitely like hit the ground running a little bit, and it is totally just because I've been writing basically like headlines for the last year.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting. Yeah, man. I don't know how to come up. Yeah, I don't know where those ideas come from.
Do you have at least some form of ADD? Probably.
I probably could definitely get a diagnosis if I went in for it. I was always like pretty decent at school, but if I hadn't been, like, like
if you're not interested in it, it just your brain jumps from all
very much. Yeah.
Just so many comics that I know. My actual like field is psychology, and one of the biggest things I've learned, because I work with a lot of inattentive kids, is that the positives for whatever they're interested in, their brain can make really fast connections. And if your interest is in some kind of social realm, oftentimes with comedy, that's where a lot of these quick connections, either weird connections that lead to good comedy writing, or quick connections that come to, you know, improv and sketch, is like a cornerstone. If you don't have like there's so many comics who have that kind of, if not an attention problem, an impulsivity, not problem, but like they're impulsive. And so it'll just be like, that's where the two connect. And it's like, yeah.
That's really, that sounds right. That's really interesting. I've never heard it that way before.
Because I'm the only person, I think, who, like, not only person, that's me being egotistical, but like most people who are this obsessed, and this is where I fucked up, most people who are this obsessed with comedy didn't pursue a full master's degree in another field.
Sure.
And so there aren't that many people bothering to connect the two, because nobody gives a shit about the other one. But I do feel like psychology and comedy are like the two professions where everyone in the world feels like they could do it, because everyone thinks they're funny and everyone thinks they know people, and so they're like, no, I could be a therapist, or I could be a comedian.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely, I mean, that is also me with comedy, I think. But that's everyone also starting with comedy. Is you have to see like a comedy special on TV and be like, psh, I could do that. You know?
Well, that's the other thing with the psychology piece, is I feel like a lot of comedians, and whether they started, they probably didn't even necessarily start this way, but through getting good at comedy, you have to make these observations. I forget what comic it was, but someone referred to comedy as, to be a comedian, you have to be able to see the world through how everyone else sees it, like the normal way of seeing the world, but also kind of have a parallel view of it. So you can't just not get what everyone else is seeing. You have to understand it, but also go, I don't see it that way. And with those two things combined, then that's where comedy comes from. And I think that makes perfect sense, because you can't, like, most of the people I see at open mics who are bombing and have no idea of that they are bombing, or an understanding of why they're bombing, it's because they're just seeing the world from a different light, and it's not connecting with anybody. You gotta see it how they see it, see it how you see it, and put the two together. And I think that's definitely a big piece, which is why I think a lot of comedians, through doing that, have a relatively good knowledge of psychology, because they've been studying people the same way that psychologists study people.
It's really interesting. I actually have a question for you, just because you have this background. I have a couple friends who are actually really into this, like, perspective of things. But what do you think? I know this is kind of an open question, and I've read a couple books on it. What do you think makes something funny? Like, what do you think makes something funny? Why is stuff funny?
I can only really talk to me. I do think about this just in general, but like the combination of agreement plus absurdity is a big thing. Like, it's always a combination for me. I feel like if it's, granted, like, if you're a random audience member who maybe watches theater specials and goes to see live comedy once a year, you might find a lot more funny. You might find just absurdity funny. You might find just an agreement funny. You might find just an observation or that you relate to funny. But as you really start to, like, I feel like it's leveling up in an RPG. Like, you start out at level 1 and fucking everything's hilarious. That's why. And so if you start watching stand-up at 12 years old, by the time you're 20, you find far less funny.
Oh,
but if you
God,
start watching
yeah.
stand-up at 20, you still think Jeff Dunham is fun. I don't
Right.
want to be a dick.
Yeah, I mean,
Like that.
we'll go with him. Yeah, he's
So-
not going to hear this.
Yeah. Well, you don't know. He's a big listener. That'd be funny.
Got
My
that
one
talking
high-profile
jalapeno,
listener.
just like, oh no, they're saying the bad stuff about you, Jeff. Just sitting alone in his basement. That's what he does at night.
That'd be kind of sad. Like I feel like, so keep that in mind. So like when I say what's funny, I'm thinking about it from the eyes of someone who's been like, into comedy for a long period of time. I think it has to be like this chemistry of I've never thought of that before, or I've never thought of that angle before. Plus, there has to be some kind of absurdity. I think that's why a lot of super PC people don't find offensive jokes funny, because they look at it like it's observational humor, not absurdist humor. And if you look at it with a straight face of, oh, that's a point they're trying to make, as opposed to, hey, me saying this is funny because who in their right mind would say this? Like that kind of thing. So I think the absurdity plus some kind of understanding, emotional or cognitive connection. That'd be my theory. What's your theory on it? I
mean, I'm not going to say this is my theory. There's an interesting book that I have completely forgotten the name of, but it is, I'm great at this.
Some book by some person.
The most compelling theory, at least sort of like an evolutionary theory of comedy that I've heard, is like so there's interesting ones, because there's some that are like comedy is all about, you know, having power over something and performing like superiority over it, and that works for some cases of comedy but not others. Like I think most, like there's like insult comedy, and that makes a lot of sense, or just like satire, and like that is sort of like a purpose of humor. But it doesn't really apply to maybe things like wordplay.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
The most compelling thing that I've heard is the idea that it's sort of the brain like housekeeping, like keeping track of like what reality is by rewarding you for noticing where things are disjointed.
Oh, that's cool.
It's that's like the best I can sum it up. Just like
I've literally never thought about it in a non-practical way. Every time I think about why it's something funny, I think about it as how can I make other people laugh. But in that theoretical evolutionary perspective, that's a really good point.
I can tell you that this is how I approach problems. And I first just want to look up everything I can about every context. And like, I'm a huge, like dork, huge nerd. I mean, I'm a software engineer with a religion degree. Anyway, but I can't say that it's helped me, but it is just like how it was like the first thing I did was like, I'm going to take this comedy stuff seriously. Why do people laugh at all? Decode it from there.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. Like I very much, all my psych stuff is all research-based, evidence-based practices, which is like you need many, many high-profile studies that show something works before you even like. It's all scientific method. It really like drags psychology from a soft science to a hard science kind of thing. It drives it over that line, because like Freudian stuff is soft as shit. But like when you take
just made most of that up. It's just like, oh, this is how it works.
It was that a broken clock is right twice a day. Like he was so right about a few things that like,
crazy.
You're like, all right. But so with that in mind, like I'm a big fan of what's people consider the next wave of like that you're going to throw this into other psych theories is evolutionary psychology of what is the evolutionary benefit of anxiety, which is pretty well documented as we are a people who evolved over hundreds of thousands of years and millions, if you keep tracing DNA back, developing this anxiety that keeps us from getting eaten by lions, or whatever it is. And now in a short span of a couple thousand years, we've gone from all of our evolution putting us as cave people, and in a few thousand years, we're flying on airplanes. Like that is absurd.
It's crazy.
So, like, we have our biological makeup has not caught up with the technology and culture and society that we have, and so like that makes sense. And now they're really delving into what's the evolutionary reason behind depression, basically all the non-pure chemical stuff, because like bipolar would be more of a pure chemical, schizophrenia would be more of a pure chemical, like something is misconnected, like neurology wise. But applying evolutionary theory to comedy, I think that's amazing. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It is a reward system for noticing the incongruencies. That your brain should reward you for the incongruencies. You, my friend, have taken away all of the mystery and joy that I had in comedy. I'm just kidding.
Good. That's what I came here to do. This is 110 is the last episode of the Eric Tries Too Hard podcast. You heard it here first.
That's
over.
A great theory. Oh my god, I love that. All
Again, right, not my theory.
Yeah, I know, but that's
Google that as best you can. I'm sorry, I don't. I'm terrible with names.
That's awesome. No, me too. I feel like such an idiot with my coworkers, where I'm like, I read a great study. Oh, who was it by? I don't know. What was it called? I don't know. When was it done? I don't know. But it was good. So you leave college, you go to New York, you find a job in New York, you go there for the potential to follow comedy. So that was 3 years ago. What did you do to get involved in sketch, writing, stand-up, all that stuff? How did you start getting involved in all that?
Man. It's sort of a different path for everything. Stand-up, you just kind of have to start doing it. It's the most bootstrappy that way.
How often do you go up, in a week, average?
Oh, man. I try to go up 4 to 5 times a week. The last month I have not. I've had a lot of really interesting opportunities come up, and I've got some packet submissions that are in flight for things, and it's been really cool. And I'm super thankful for the opportunity. I've gotten up maybe twice a week for the last month and a half, but ideally 4, maybe 5 times for stand up. And then for sketch, there's much more institutional stuff. So you just sort of take classes at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater or the People's Improv Theater, which is a really cool way to just meet cool people and really smart, good writers. And I'm sure there's other Hard Times writers who have come up through those programs.
Yeah, I noticed recently, just because everyone posted their Twitters, so I went to go follow everybody in that thread, and I noticed so many people were from New York.
It's funny because I know almost none of them. There's one guy, Jeremy Hammond, who I'm pretty cool with, but other than that,
yeah. Well, as I've been going back and forth with people in the threads, and people friend me, I friend them, and all that stuff. I keep seeing people. I'm like, oh shit, you're mutual friends with all these people I know through punk rock, or all these people I know through radio, or these people through comedy.
Yeah.
It's a really cool network that it makes the world seem a lot smaller. When you're
absolutely.
Oh, shit. There really are a finite amount of people doing this. Okay, so you got into it doing that. And man, do you have stand-up stuff online that I can Google? Or
you totally can. Again, it's just Kyle Earth. There's only 2 people named that, so it's gonna be you're gonna find me. I'm a little lower than the other one, so I got more up there. You find me at kyleearth.com. There's not much there.
I know that's your name and your email.
Yeah.
I was laughing so hard. I was like, all right.
Yeah.
At least you got the domain.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I need to do something with that. So there is some stand-up stuff that I am proud of. I kind of stopped doing bringer shows and stopped doing things where it would be easy to film stuff for the last year, just to get, I wanted to get a lot better. So I'm going to try and get a new tape next month, just cause I don't want to put myself behind everything I have up there now. But I do have other videos on my YouTube channel that I am very happy with that are weirder stuff.
Now, this is interesting to me in the world of comedy versus music. With music, they're so inverted, where music, no one in the industry, and by industry, I don't even mean big labels. I mean promoters, other bands, anybody else doing what you're doing. They don't give a shit about you until you have fans, and you tend to get fans by putting things online. With comedy, it seems to be the inverse, where your main goal going in is there's plenty of places for you to go up. The main goal going in is to impress promoters with your comedy, impress other comedians with your comedy, meet people, and the fans come last. It's almost like you don't end up putting anything up until you're already established.
You're right, and that's infuriating to me. I really wish if you know the secret, let me know. I definitely want to be your audience.
My answer to that secret, I keep trying to think of my first big foray into actually getting, other than the band that I'm in currently, big foray into actually having people pay attention. Something I did was last year I wrote this it was like 15,000 word, like eight piece series on how to build a local fan base for a band. And it did really well strictly among band members, because anybody who's not in a band, there's no reason for them to even give a shit about this. But since I started doing the podcast with comedians, I've had a lot of comics ask me like, "Oh, how could you, transcribe that to comedy?" And the truth is, I don't know, because I just got here. But like, but it really is just like every once in a while I'm tempted to go, "Oh, there are a lot of things that tend to work with music that could probably work with comedy," but it's almost like you have to be 7-8 years into comedy before you're even good enough for it to be worthwhile to get all that attention. I don't know. It's interesting, and to me, the two biggest things that comedians have on their favor is, to gain an audience, is podcasts and Twitter. Is the fact that you can tweet stuff out and do well, just like that's how you get people to know your name, your whatever. And same with podcasts. Like, there's no reason not to do a podcast at least once a week. There's no reason to, it's something your name can be on. That who cares if 10 people listen to it? That's 10 more people who know your name, and you get better at your craft while doing it. Like, those are the only things that I can think of. But it really just seems to be a true meritocracy where you're like, no, get good. And I'm sure it's plenty of other stuff too.
There's plenty of other stuff there with that. It is a thing that if you are really good, there is work for you, and I do like that about it.
That was the whole Aziz Ansari's thing, was just like, just be good. It's like, you can do the other stuff. It's like, you just have to be undeniably funny. That's all you can really control, and hope that things work out for you.
Yeah.
So okay, so with the Hard Times, at what point did you get into the Hard Times? Because you already had the background. You had been doing, comedy writing and whatnot. So when did you start writing for the Hard Times, and how did you find it, apply for it, and when did you start?
I found the Hard Times probably a year ago. I have some friends who are really funny who are in bands back in Northwest Arkansas, and they would just constantly repost articles. And I'd just be like, "Oh, these are hilarious." And I got to the point where I would just go to the Hard Times website sometimes just to look around every couple months. And I was really impressed with the quality of headlines. I think, this isn't me just being a brown noser. I think the quality of the headlines on that website are on par with just anything else out there.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think 100%. Yeah, absolutely. And the Photoshops too. I think sometimes the article content has been getting a lot better over the last year, and I think that's the thing that is if you were gonna say we're not Onion quality, but I think it's basically there, and I've always seen it as this very just undervalued entity because it's incredibly good.
No, it's absurd.
And so I had an opportunity to apply. I was really deep into sketch sort of last October. I had the opportunity to apply for a house team at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater, and I was like, all right, I've been working really hard towards this. If I don't get it, I want to try exploring online writing more, because I've noticed I am a very good writer compared to a lot of my stand-up friends. And it's something that I have a huge background in it from college, and it's the one thing I kind of gave up doing except for Twitter. And then I did not make a team, and the odds were very low that I would. And I was like, all right, let's see what's out there. And I was just sort of hate reading a bunch of comedy online. Why can't I do that? Why can't I write for that? I could. And then I ended up on the Hard Times About page, and they were like, hey, do you want to submit stuff? Put together a packet and send it in. I was like, oh, they actually have a route. That's great. I feel like most websites, it's very obtuse. And I was so excited. I submit headlines, and, in retrospect, most of them were very bad.
Me too. Jesus. I had to submit 2 sections of headlines because it was the first one was so bad.
It's crazy they let me in, but
when did you get in?
I think it was around Christmas, very close to then.
Mine was mid-November. So it was very close. I remember seeing you very early on, and usually when a writer gets added, they put out a lot right away. And I feel like I was in the same boat. Well, that's so cool because I feel like you and I and the people around us, because I think I was person number, like, I think there have been 9 writers added since I was added, something like that, maybe about 11, somewhere between there. And you being one of them leaves only, and that's been, that was what, 5 months ago, 4 or 5 months ago.
Yeah, you're right.
So like, we may have slipped in under that rate. I know they still accept people.
That is how I feel, honestly. I'm just like, ooh, right time.
Like we just right in, because we've seen it. Like the jumps, like I don't know if you check. I don't check like unintentionally, but I noticed that every single week the likes on Facebook go up by about 10 grand.
Oh man!
Like, oh my god, it's absurd. It is absolutely absurd.
Yeah, it is.
Anyway,
it is crazy.
Yeah. So I hate to let you go, but I have to because I have another guest lined up. But you were so awesome. Thank you so much for coming in. I could talk to you
Same thing,
so many of my guests. Like I could talk to you forever. But yeah, give us any place we can find your stuff, even repeat stuff you said before. And then if you're interested, we'll have you on again in our group form. That's usually what we do, where we have a bunch of comics come in and just talk about whatever. All right, cool. All right. So give us your plugs.
Okay, you can find me. My name is Kylerf, KYLEERF. You can find me on Twitter at Kylerf. You can find me at kylerf.com or youtube.com/Kylerf. That's basically it. Type my name into Google. Like you know how to use the internet. You'll find it. And I've got some like cool video plans coming up soon, and a lot of other opportunities in flight that hopefully will turn into something. But for now, find me on Twitter. That's where all my best stuff is all the time.
It's really solid. And you can find listeners now. You can find more podcasts like this at erictriestoohard.com. Eric Tries Too Hard on YouTube and Facebook. Eric Tries on Twitter. And subscribe on iTunes. Eric Tries Too Hard Podcast Network. Get all, 17,000 podcasts that we do. All right. Well, thank you so much, Kyle. And
it's been a
we'll
pleasure.
Talk to you soon. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks
Great talking to you, Eric.
All right, see you.